Many of those recognitions will involve many of you. So as we go through that, at the end of the recognition, we'll do a little bit of break so that some of you don't have to sit through the entire council meeting, which could be several hours from now when we end. So we'll respectfully allow anybody that wants to leave to go ahead and leave. We will not be offended, I promise you. So at this time, I'm going to ask Councilmember Young to do the invocation and the pledge. Bridget?
Please pray with me. Lord, we give thanks to you for continuing to bless our community. We meet here tonight to serve our community, to use our resources wisely, to represent all members of our community fairly, and to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognize our responsibility to the past and to the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts. May we act wisely and to your approval. Help guide us with your wisdom as we go to the polls over the next few weeks to elect future leaders for our community. And as always, dear Lord, watch over all of our men and women in uniform who sacrifice so much to keep us safe. It is in your precious name we pray. Amen. Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first recognition tonight is actually not on the council agenda. I want to recognize Boy Scout Troop 1731. This is one of the first all-ladies troops under the new rules of the Boy Scouts of America. The chartering organization is the Exchange Club of Sugar Land, and we have 10 ladies represented by Dulles High School, the Honor Roll School, Texas Connections Academy, Quail Valley Middle School, and Meadows Elementary. And at this time, I'm going to ask their scout leader to stand, and then each of the girls will give you their name. Sir?
My name is David Van Cleek. I'm the Scoutmaster of Troop 1731. We have with us tonight a number of our scouts who are working on their citizenship in the community merit badge by attending this council meeting. At this time, they'll introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Alyssa Lucas, and I go to Dulles High School.
I'm Kira Self, and I go to Honor Roll School.
I'm Emily Disney, and I go to Satarsha Middle School.
I'm Kaylee Kirby, and I go to Quail Valley Middle School.
I'm Alyssa Kerr, and I go to Meadows Elementary.
Well, welcome, ladies, and thank you all. Thank you for the leadership. I think you've got a couple other gentlemen here with you, though, behind you, don't you?
I'm Gary Lucas. I'm one of the parents of Alyssa.
Thanks, Gary.
Good evening. I'm Jason Kirby, and I'm one of the troop committees.
Thank you, Jason. And now I'm going to ask Carrie Paxton Lamke to come down front with me. Earlier this evening, we had a chance. We graduated our Sugar Land 101 course. This was 25 extraordinary individuals. This was our 17th class, and Carrie led that class. We've had a number of folks that have gone through it. Some of our council members here, Carol McCutcheon, Himesh Gandhi, and Amy Mitchell went through some of the earlier classes, even though they don't look that old. Some of them are almost as old as I am. So this is a time to honor them. So I'm going to ask them, Carrie, I'm going to let you say a few words, and then I'm going to ask them to come down so we can get a picture.
Thanks, Mayor.
Got it. There you go.
Thanks,
Mayor.
I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for participating in the program. It was a real pleasure spending so much time with you, and I hope that you will take everything that you've learned and stay involved with the City of Sugar Land, whether it's within the community itself or applying for boards and commissions. It's just been a real pleasure spending time with you. I also wanted to thank all of the city staff members who took time out of their schedules to present. There's a lot involved in this program, and we greatly appreciate it. And I'd also like to thank one person in particular. If Lillian Collada could come down here, please. She and I were Team Sugar Land 101 this season, and there's a lot of magic that happens, and because of Lillian. I just wanted to thank her. Thanks, Leanne, for all that you do. No, thank you. And before we take the, Lillian, you have to be in the group photo.
You have to be in the group photo.
Jeff Baldwin is going to come forward and speak on behalf of the class.
Thank you so very much. It's an honor to be able to speak on behalf of our distinguished group of Sugar Land residents in Class 101. It was a unique opportunity, Mayor, council members, and all of your executive staff, to have an opportunity to learn firsthand what the city does to help serve its residents. We were able to just see them hand in hand on a day-to-day operation, and it was senior executive people who were actually the ones who were presenting to us. I was told we weren't the best class, but we were definitely the most inquisitive class. And so
that can't be right. That just can't be right.
But that unique opportunity gave us an opportunity to at least be with the folks that do the work on a day-to-day basis. There was a number of hours and resources that the city gave towards the 101 class, and a lot of them serve on boards and HOA boards and community development boards, and so our return on investment will be forthcoming, and some of them are already applying to be on other boards. So we want to thank you so very, very much for doing that and your commitment into us. I was a little reluctant at first to even join, but I was not volunteered, but voluntold by my wife to go and do it. So it was a pleasure. Who's a graduate?
Who was a graduate, by the way?
And so I would encourage others to take the class. There's also the Police Academy, the Fire Academy, and the Airport Academy, and you get a good opportunity to be able to just see what the city does to serve you. Because I truly believe as residents that we not only have a responsibility to the city, but we have accountability to the success of the city in the future. So get involved. We want to thank Carrie for all your hard work and presenting. This is from us. We did follow all the ethic rules. We took the airline tickets out, so you just have the card. So thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So I just have to mention, last week they asked me, we are your favorite class, right, Carrie? And I said, well, they're all my favorite classes. This was I will have to say, the most inquisitive and energetic from day one. Usually they're shy and start asking questions about class 2 or 3, but out of the gate, we were trying to keep up with you. So thank you very much.
If y'all would all come down now, please. Council members. Just kind of get centered around council right there. There you go. Some of you want to have your family members come down. Lillian, come over here. See, here's your future boards, commissions, probably council members. There might even be a mayor or two in there.
All right, everybody look this way, please. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Our next recognition is Be Kind to Animals Week, which is May 6th through 12th. And as part of that, we're also Catherine's going to talk a little bit about our recipient for the 2019 Hensley Award. Catherine, if you could come down, please.
Absolutely.
And I see you've got a basket full of cool gifts, so you always have the best gift baskets.
Absolutely. So we're a little early this year. I know Be Kind to Animals Week isn't for another couple weeks, but it is my favorite time of year because it's something that, of course, is near and dear to my heart, being the Animal Services Manager. So this week is actually the longest running recognition week in the history of the United States, as it commemorates how we treat animals and inspire our communities to treat animals. As part of this week, we encourage people to come and adopt animals, volunteer at your local shelter, give donations of your time, resources if you have them to the shelter. Again, just acts of kindness towards animals this week, animals of all kinds. We're reminded that wildlife is part of our ecosystem and we should be kind to it too, especially since Earth Day is coming up. As part of this, we started what's called the Hensley Award in 2014. And that was in recognition of a wonderfully awesome staff member that we have at the shelter, and she's sitting in the front row right here, Miss Jenny Hensley. She is one of our part-time kennel techs, and the award is named for her because I was so taken aback by her compassion and her empathy, the way that she was willing to care for the animals, take neonates into her home, which for any of you that have bottle-fed kittens or dogs, that's a 24-hour job of love and commitment through the struggles. And I wanted some way special to recognize those type of people in our community that really give back. And so Jenny was the first recipient of that award because she's an inspiration to me and keeps me grounded when I look at the way that we care about animals. Another one of those amazing organizations is Lexington Vet Clinic. They have always been very supportive of the animal shelter, and we're grateful for all the support that they give us. But the Hensley goes to an individual person, and I want to tell just a very short story. I wanted to be a veterinarian from the time that I was 3. As soon as I could say the word, I had my stuffed animals out, and I had my stethoscope, and I was checking everything out. When I went to college, I selected my college based on the fact that I wanted to go to vet school. Being out-of-state tuition, I had to get a job, and it happened to be at the veterinary teaching hospital. It was at that time where I would see students enter the vet program with this caring, compassion, this empathy, and then by the 4th year of graduating, that seemed to have drained away. It probably had something to do with biochemistry too, but the story sounds better if I talk about the compassion aspect. It really scared me. I was like, I don't want to lose that compassion and that empathy. And I thought that that's what vet school did, that it sucked that out of you because you only had so much to give. And this person that I'd like to recognize tonight, never let that happen. And I swear every year she shows more compassion and more empathy each and every time that I see her, and that is Dr. Willhouse. She is an amazing individual. She is one of the vets at Lexington, again, who is a big supporter of the shelter, but she goes above and beyond. Every year she's willing to lend a hand. She's willing to do those extra surgeries for us. She's willing to come to the shelter and give us extra consults on animals that we're struggling with. And she is just amazing. And if I ended up going to vet school, I hope that was something that I would have ended up to be just like you. I think you're an amazing, amazing woman. And I'd like to recognize you with the Hensley.
Dr. Ross, come.
So if you'll come up, Jenny, if you'll come up. And so she has with her tonight her daughter Isa, her partner Kim, Chelsea, who is her veterinary assistant. Is that close enough? Okay. Dr. Stanley, who owns the Lexington practice, and then Jackie, who's the office manager. So thank you for your assistance in trying to do that secretly to get her here. So,
Roman, you got a picture?
get on there. And see, she's so dedicated. She's here on her crutches. She was doing her continuing education units for her license.
Congratulations.
So.
Here we go.
All right, great. Everyone up here. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jim, thank you.
I don't know about that. This is an honor from you. So with that, I'm going to turn it.
You can turn it back over.
Turn it back to you.
We're going to do a proclamation.
Pretty much more. You turn that off.
Yeah. And we're going to do, and I'll present this, Catherine, to you. This is a proclamation. Be Kind to Animals Week, May 6th through the 12th of 2019. Whereas the American Humane initiated Be Kind to Animals Week in 1915 in hopes of inspiring millions of Americans to come together and show their compassion and build a more humane world for animals. And whereas over a century later, Be Kind to Animals Week is still celebrated annually during the first full week of May and is the longest running, most successful humane education campaign in American history. And whereas to build a new generation of animal advocates, American Humane is challenging 1 million people this year to take the Be Kind to Animals Week pledge, asking them to assist with efforts to protect and better the lives of animals. Catherine, thank you very much.
I forgot to give her a bow. Notice it has the cat angel in there because she...
Yeah, get a picture of that basket.
No, stealing it, cat person.
Our next recognition is the March of Dimes March for Babies Walk, which is April the 13th. I'm going to ask Whitney Tullison to come down, Katie Nixon, and I saw Chris Siebenaler earlier. Chris is in the back. If you all could please come down and help me with this. Hi, Whitney. Nice to meet you. Hi, Katie. Hi. Hi, Joseph. That's okay. Hey, Chris, how are you doing? Who wants to introduce? Chris.
Well, thank you, Mayor. We appreciate the opportunity of being here tonight. I'm going to give 1 minute of information because I know that y'all have probably tons of business to conduct tonight. But over the last 3 years, the March of Dimes through the March for Babies, which the walk is the primary fundraiser for the March of Dimes nationally. And 3 years ago, through former Mayor Jimmy Thompson, he was the first chair for this march, and we set a goal to raise money to benefit moms and babies in Fort Bend County. And I'm happy to say that at the conclusion of this year's march, which was this past weekend, we actually exceeded the $1 million mark in fundraising for 3 years. And that's just a phenomenal, it's funny, 3 years ago, or after that first year, and when we were talking about wanting to hit that mark, I was somewhat skeptical that we would hit that mark, and sure enough, we did. And I'll tell you what, the business community, in addition to just the community in general, really rallies around this because they recognize how important this is to increase awareness around infant prematurity, in particular infant mortality, which could be better in the state of Texas. We're not rated very highly in this state compared to the rest of the country. So this is an opportunity for us to raise awareness and then support people who are going through an experience with prematurity. So, I frankly didn't do a whole heck of a lot, but our team of Wendy Tollison and Katie Nixon and Darcy Wells, who's not here, and others from Tony Walton, the March of Dimes, they work so hard each year doing this. And I'm actually going to allow you to introduce yourself because I can't remember your name because I just met you.
I'm Danielle Bakken-Norcross, and this is Tessa, and she was born at 31 weeks, and she was 4 pounds, and is now 16 months old, and quite healthy, as you can see. And we are pleased to be part of the March of Dimes in Fort Bend. So thank you for having us today.
Thank you, Katie. That's all I had to say. Thanks so much to our community for rallying behind us now for 3 straight years and for making the March for Babies a huge success.
Well, and for those of you that don't know, when this came to former Mayor Thompson several years ago, I think a lot of people in the community, including me, were like, well, what? There's not a problem in Fort Bend County. Well, no, there is a problem in Fort Bend County, and Chris should know. He's the CEO of Methodist Hospital System here in Fort Bend. And as you said, the community's rallied to bring awareness to it. Thanks for the hard work of you all on the staff. Thanks to the moms and the babies that participate. It really is a program that we need to continue to focus attention on, continue to focus resources on, so that we can make sure that no child slips through the crack. We've got a proclamation. It's for March of Dimes March for Babies event, the CARES initiative, whereas the March of Dimes March for Babies is a fundraising effort for the purpose of improving the health of babies by preventing premature birth, birth defects, and infant mortality. And whereas the CARES initiative emphasizes community, advocacy, research, education, and support to reduce disparities in preterm birth, influence legislative and regulatory activities in Texas, invested nearly $20 million in research to understand, treat, and prevent serious health problems that threaten infants, and helps women and families prepare for the healthiest possible pregnancy. And whereas the March of Dimes March for Babies stands with thousands of people across the country committed to building a brighter future. Thank you all. Thank you for what you do. Council members, if we could stand, and if I could get you guys centered right back over here. Chris?
I'm going to throw one more shameless plug in here.
Please.
I have to tell you that I talked about our corporate sponsors. In particular, I really have to recognize Schlumberger and the tremendous support and commitment that they bring, being the presenting sponsor again this year, and just in terms of their contributions to the fundraising efforts. It's really outstanding. We should be proud of
Thanks,
Schlumberger.
Chris. Yeah. Ladies, I'll let you hold that. There you go.
All right, everybody. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Good to see you. Number 1, public comment. This is for anybody that wants to comment about one of the items on the agenda. unless it's a public hearing. If it's a public hearing, I'd ask that you wait for the public hearing and you could comment then. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the council? Second call. Hearing none, we're going to go ahead and move to item number 2, review the consent agenda. Item number 3, the consent agenda. All the items here are considered routine business. We'll take them as one motion unless a council member wants to pull one of those items. If the council member wants to pull an item, we'll pull it. We'll take the remaining items as one agenda, and then staff will make a brief presentation before we take up the pulled item. Got a motion by Gandhi, second by Mitchell. If you'll vote at this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Moving on now to item number 4, contracts and agreements. 4A, consideration of an action on authorizing execution of a standard tax abatement agreement by and between the City of Sugar Land, Texas, and Heavy Construction Systems Specialist, Inc. We have with us Devin Rodriguez, our Assistant Director of Economic Development. Devin.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you very much. First, I want to quickly introduce, we do have an individual from HCSS here tonight. So Tom Webb, who is the VP Strategic Initiatives and Customer Solutions, is here tonight representing HCSS if we have any clarifying questions at the end that I cannot assist with. So let me continue with our presentation tonight. Again, for the benefit of all of us and the public watching, just wanted to cover about tax abatements in Sugar Land and why we have this program available to our business community. So it does, the tax abatements, they do encourage economic development. The result of it is that it has that added value to the tax roll. It also provides significant property tax revenue to the city after the abatement expires, which is no more than a 10-year term, and it fully benefits the local school districts because the school districts do not participate in tax abatements, and so they are, from the very beginning of the value being added to the tax roll, benefit from that additional value. Our program follows the state guidelines and our city guidelines as well, which were strengthened last year when we made some amendments to them. So a quick overview of the tax abatement process. The first step is the creation of the reinvestment zone, and it requires a public hearing and a first reading, which we completed on April 2nd, and then a second reading and approval, which was completed tonight during the consent. Then we also have the approval of the tax abatement agreement, which is what this item is tonight, and it's usually can be included with the second reading, which is how this project was conducted. So a quick background on HCSS. They're a software company that serves the heavy highway and construction industry. So it offers a variety of products all the way from every stage of construction. So it can be bidding, it can be fleet maintenance, just the whole range of what different contractors and construction industry businesses need to complete their business. HCSS relocated their headquarters here to Sugar Land, to an almost 12-acre site, and it's just adjacent to the Sugar Land Business Park. So the first facility is 42,000 square feet, and the second one is 16,000 square feet, and we have their completed in 2010 and 2015. And for those, we do have an active tax abatement for 50% that goes through the end of this year. So project details for what we're talking about tonight, phase 3. They are proposing to build another building. It would be a 2-story, approximately 56,000 square foot office building. And it would also include a 3-level parking garage that about 280 cars would be the capacity. The total impact to the community is $12 million in real personal property, 200 new jobs over a 7-year period, so as the company continues to grow, and that those new jobs would have an average annual salary of $70,000. The reinvestment zone, so as part of the tax abatement, this is reinvestment zone 2019-01, which is approved by ordinance number 2157, which was actually creating the reinvestment zone. So the reinvestment zone for this project is not the entire 12-acre site. It is that specific portion that is just where they are building that new building. So that's what that little triangle piece that you see is the almost, or 4 and change of acres of that total 12-acre site. The tax abatement agreement. These are the details of the agreement itself. It is a 10-year term is what is proposed. The performance obligations are to construct that 56,000 square foot office building, to spend $12 million in real and personal property to build that building, a minimum improvement value of $9.6 million, creating the 200 jobs over 7 years, and then that average wages of the new employees must be at least $70,000. The tax abatement is 35% over a 10-year period, which is in line with the guidelines that was renewed last year. And the compliance portion of this agreement is that in order to get the tax abatement, they must meet the minimum value of the improvements of that $9.6 million. And there is an abatement percentage reduction if they don't meet the employee creation that is outlined of those 200 jobs over 7 years. So we have phased it in over the 7-year period. And if those marks are not met, there is a percentage reduction included in the agreement. So our recommendation tonight is it was reviewed by the City Council Economic Development Committee, and the agreement was, and the staff recommends approval. So if approved, HCSS would begin construction this summer with the goal of completing by mid-2020 with their new building. And with that, if anybody has any clarifying questions for me.
Thank you, Devin. I'd like to say, with regard to HCSS, we call it the Google of Sugar Land. You guys, Tom, y'all have done an extraordinary job. Many of us on council have toured your facility. This is a way that our city council can invest in those extraordinary companies that are part of Sugar Land. For those of you that don't know, our tax rate of 32 cents, 31762, the reason that we're able to have a 32-cent property tax rate is because of the sales and use tax generated by the businesses around the city of Sugar Land. It was recognized years ago by other city councils because we're all, at the end of the day, we're all business people. We're not politicians, we're elected leaders. And this is a good way for us to participate in the success of you guys. So thank you all very, very much. At this time, I'm going to ask somebody from the Economic Development Committee if they'd like to say a few words. Bridget.
Actually in his district, so he's being very kind by allowing me to say a few words. And yes, of course, it did come before economic development. We are extremely excited about you, first of all, being in our city, and second of all, wanting to expand in our city. So we were unanimous in our approval of this. And with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Good. Bridget. I've got a motion by Young, second by Porter. Anyone else? You vote at this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Devin. Item number 5B, consideration of and action on the reallocation of community development block grant funds in the amount of $151,858.92 to the Mayfield Park Restroom Project as part of the annual action plan substantial amendment. And we have with us our own Stacy Henderson, Director of Environmental and Neighborhood Services. Stacy.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, requires the development of a 5-year consolidated plan to detail the community development and housing needs within the city, and an annual action plan to outline the annual expenditure of CDBG funds. So these documents are required when you are a entitlement community with the CDBG program. So we have complied with these requirements over the years of our participation. Now, significant changes to the consolidated plan or the annual action plan requires the onset of a substantial amendment process. Now, substantial amendments are required when there's a change in activity that will reallocate at least 20% of an activity's funding allocation, commence an activity not previously outlined in one of the plans, or cancel an activity that was previously outlined. Now, with the upcoming conclusion of the city CDBG program after our current program year 2018, and the need to finalize existing projects, it led to the onset of this process and the reallocation of funds. So we have a proposed substantial amendment that includes reallocation of funds that remained after previous projects were completed in both program years 2016 and 2017, and then also a reallocation of some 2018 dollars following dissolution of the Fort Bend Corps in December of last year, and some unallocated administration funds that we're not going to be using due to the conclusion of the CDBG program. So highlighted in this table is a summary of those proposed substantial amendments, and also a couple of minor amendments that you'll note at the top, just to document the entire allocation that is being reallocated. Minor amendments are processed internally by city staff. So we are looking at the reallocation of $151,858.92 being reallocated to the program year 2018 Mayfield Park Restroom Project. This would increase the available project funds to a little over $278,000. And the previously allocated 4B funds would no longer be needed for this project due to the increase in CDBG funds, and the project would solely be funded with CDBG dollars. Substantial amendment and funding reallocation was reviewed with the City Council's Finance Audit Committee in February. We had, as required by HUD, a public review and comment period from March 7th to April 5th, a public hearing on March 5th, or March 20th, excuse me, and during that time period, we did not receive any comments. And at this time, the Environmental and Neighborhood Services Department recommends the City Council's approval of the reallocation of $151,858.92 in accordance with the substantial amendment process. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Stacy. Would anybody from Finance and Audit like to address this? Don't all jump up there at one time.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. No, this is a great opportunity to use these funds to benefit one of the economically challenged neighborhoods in our city. It also frees up 4B funds, and we have an awful lot of projects waiting on 4B funds in the city. So it was a great idea, and we were unanimous in support of it.
And it's in your district?
Well, it just happens.
It just happens to be in your district.
Just happens.
Ramesh.
I guess the end of the program, does this kind of clear out the balances at this point? Will this be the end?
Yes, this would conclude the balance.
And with the monies now coming from what I guess is a different bucket, does it change the project in any way? Is there a need to modify as the scope of the project or anything of that?
No, there would need no modifications required.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? You vote at this time, please. Do we have a motion and a second?
Yes.
We have a motion. We have a motion by Porter. Bridget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to recognize at this time Councilmember Porter, because he has worked so hard, not only with the renovation of the park, which is now a great community park, but also he's worked really hard to make sure that the restrooms happen. And I'm sure all of the residents in that area greatly appreciate you, Mr. Porter.
And I'll second that, Bridget. Yeah, you've done an extraordinary job on that, Steve. I've got a motion by Porter, second by McCutcheon. If you'll vote at this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Thank you, Stacy. Item number 5, municipal utility district bonds. 5A, consideration of an action on authorizing issuance of Fort Bend County Municipal Utility District number 138, unlimited tax road refunding bond, series 2019, in the amount of $2,720,000. we have Ms. Jennifer Brown, our Director of Finance. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. This evening, Fort Bend County MUD 138 is requesting council's approval of a refunding bond issue that they would like to do. Just a little background on the district. It was created in 2005 to provide water, wastewater, and drainage utilities. It is one of 4 districts that serve the Telfair development, which is a little over 2,000 total acres. This district in particular is 704 acres. It is primarily residential, but there is some commercial, around 125 acres, 127 acres is what I show up there. The homes run between $275,000 to $1 million. The city reviews the district's bond issues really just to make sure that the district is not extending debt service schedules and that we're getting the best value for the residents because we want to make sure that we're managing their tax burden. So we've got a map here of the district, and so they did annex the what we call the jug handle portion along University Boulevard. So there's a little piece that's not totally connected, but you can see it generally runs along US 59 down University and bordered on the north by Ditch H and MUD 137, sorry, is what you see on the bottom portion there of the map. So that is one of 4 districts in Telfair. Their 2018 assessed valuation was $852 million, and their 2018 tax rate was just under 41 cents at 0.4086 cents, with 30 cents of that going to pay their debt service. This is a road refunding bond. It is refunding the 2011 bonds, which are now currently callable. If y'all remember, in 2017, the federal government did away with the ability to advance refund bonds. So now we have to wait until 90 days within the call date. And so this issue is now there. And so this will refund $2.54 million of those outstanding bonds. The district is looking to sell in May, and they're estimating, based on current market conditions, around 5% net present value savings. And it does maintain the same maturity schedule as the original bond issue. And under the creation provision and the city's policy on special districts within the city and ETJ, resolution number 1107, the city's consent is required before the district can proceed with a refunding, and so staff is recommending approval. We have reviewed the issue, and it is in compliance with that resolution and policy. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, and Christine Crotwell is here from Masterson and Associates representing the district.
Thank you, Jennifer. Clarifying questions for staff. Anyone? Jennifer, just one question. Walk us through how the city rebates back a portion of our tax rate to the district.
Certainly. So because the district is an in-city district, the city has a utility agreement with the district. We rebate 50% of the city's taxes that are collected from within the district back to the district. That helps buy down the district's tax rate. So would we not be doing that? A rebate for 2018 was a little over $1 million, 1.16 million in city tax revenues that we rebated
so
back
it's 41
to the district.
cents minus 16 cents, which is half our city tax rate. So it's
yes,
and we do that for
all of our in-city MUDs.
All but a few of our. Well, the only one that's not present is Imperial. Imperial Redevelopment District.
Yes, right. And this district also participates in TERS number 4 for the properties that are within the borders of the TERS.
Okay. Motion approved. Motion by me, second by Councilmember Mitchell. Would you vote at this time, please? And it passes 7-0. Item number 6, workshop. 6A, review of and discussion on the animal shelter expansion project. I'm going to ask Stacy Henderson, our Director of Environmental and Neighborhood Services, Ms. Barbara Willey, our Animal Advisory Board member, and Susan Chapman, our Animal Advisory Board member. I think, Stacy, you're going to start us off.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor and City Council. Before I get started, I would like to recognize our Animal Advisory Board members who are here tonight. We have several of them who are in attendance.
Ladies, could y'all stand and be recognized, please?
So tonight, we are going to be providing a kind of a project update to you. We're going to go through a variety of topics, including kind of a brief history and background of the shelter and kind of the project that we are undertaking right now, the work that has been completed by the Animal Advisory Board, and then some shelter programming and capital campaign. So our first indoor shelter was constructed in 2008 through the utilization of one-time funds. It's approximately 4,300 square feet. Now, our 2015 Facilities Master Plan update indicated that design capacity of the existing facility has been exceeded and that the facility does not have sufficient size to accommodate the expected growth. So in 2015, we began an animal shelter expansion project. Initially, we had Quorum conduct an expansion study, which focused on a needs assessment, some expansion options, a phasing plan for some improvements, and interim improvements for annexation. This study was reviewed with the City Council in June of 2016. You may recall that in November of 2016, we came back to discuss with you the police department site being selected for the location of the new shelter. You can see it here on the diagram. You have Highway 6 up here to the north and Soldiers Field, the extension of it coming over here on the east of the property. Now, the Animal Advisory Board was expanded in 2017 from 5 to 11 members, and the goal was really to broaden the scope of the board to ensure that the new shelter meets the needs of the community. And with that expansion, they had an expanded purpose. One was to review policies and programs of the current animal shelter. They have really undertaken a large volume of this work already with their review of the animal ordinances that were recently passed by City Council earlier this month, with just review of the general programs and practices that we undertake. Susan will go into more detail of that as we move through. And their current task and this goal is reviewing some SOPs, our standard operating procedures, and making some recommended revisions if there are any. Their second purpose is to review the animal capacity calculations and population trends, and they have been doing this as we've been working with our consultants on this project. And as they went through the policies and programs for our existing shelter, they also considered, what might need to be implemented at a new shelter. They have also really looked at the needs versus wants to identify the budget needs for each of these programmed spaces within the shelter. And we will be kind of identifying that and finalizing some of those details with design as we move forward. The funding options for the programming of space and the capital campaign are really where they're focusing a lot of their efforts right now. Now, as you may recall, Whiskerville opened in December of 2017. It was our phased annexation improvement. It added a total of 2,400 square feet in addition to our original shelter. That space was added for the cats, a veterinary exam room, and break room and office space. We really began the expansion project honing in on the scope and the funding in early 2017 when we contracted with Animal Arts and PGAL. They conducted multiple workshops with the board to really define that project scope and focus on the needs versus wants. And what we came out of that process with is a proposed shelter programming of a capacity with about 132 cats and 70 dogs for a total square footage of a little over 17,000 square feet, and an estimated project cost in 2019 dollars of $8.9 million. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Susan Chapman, one of our board members. She is going to kind of walk you through the work that the board has been doing.
to get a little technical assistance there. Good evening. Thank you. It's my pleasure to present to you tonight. Just wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about some of the things that the board has been working on. Since the board has expanded, of course, we have reviewed the current shelter operations. We've been looking at the assessment and the treatment of animals, what happens when animals come in, medical and behavioral evaluations, just really all of the day-to-day operations, and looking at those things not only as they're done now, but in conjunction with the expansion, where there need to be changes made, what do we need to make sure is included in that expansion, not only for any improvements, but to continue to provide the great level of care that is provided at this time. One of the big things that we looked at earlier this year, of course, was the discussion of programs and evaluating some really big items that I know were very hot topics, big in the news. One, the whole issue of no-kill. And we have continued as a board to look at really the definition of no-kill for the Maddie's Fund, which is the organization that really has kind of started that whole process and driven that. And that definition really is, to be able to save healthy and treatable animals. What is your organization doing with healthy and treatable animals? And are you euthanizing only animals that are unable to be saved? And as a board, we have chosen not to call ourselves no-kill. There's a ton of misinformation and a lot of confusion around that. But the operations of the shelter actually goes above and beyond that definition of no-kill. So what the board has decided to do is actually just focus on the mission of the organization, which is that every treatable and adoptable animal will have a forever home. TNR, trap, neuter, release, we spent an extensive amount of time talking about that, talking about the pros and the cons of that, and as a board made the recommendation that the city not continue with the policy of not having a TNR program at this time. Owner surrender was another item that we had a lot of discussions about. It's very expensive to take in owner surrenders. In our discussions, there are a lot of resources, a lot of different organizations that provide resources that we can actually send people to. The shelter staff is really wonderful about when someone is considering an owner surrender, talking them through that process, counseling them, and then if that is something that is a last resort, they have other resources that we can refer them to. So that has been how we have chosen to handle that. The expansion project, the program verification. Did I go backwards? You went backwards. All right. So I tell you I need technical assistance. I'm like, wait a minute. I had a sense of deja vu there. But the Animal Advisory Board also, we wanted to take a few minutes tonight, too, to share with you the adoption statistics. Real proud to say that over the last couple of years, you can see that the number of adoptions has continued to be trending up, which, goes back to the great work that the staff and Catherine and her staff are doing at the shelter. The other thing that we reviewed were the city's animal services ordinances, and I know that those modifications were approved by City Council earlier this month. Still having technical difficulties. I just got back from vacation, y'all. Please forgive me. I'm still a vacation head. One of the things that really kind of led up to all of these considerations that we were looking at with the city ordinances and reviewing all these items really came back to, do we need to make any changes to the mission and vision of animal services? Really reviewing all that and making those modifications. And there were a few minor little tweaks to this, but not a considerable change. But the vision of animal services is to foster and support a community where all animals are treated humanely and with compassion, in which there's a forever home for every adoptable animal. Going back to the whole item of the no-kill, this is really the basis of what the organization strives to do. And of course, the mission to achieve, to provide education. You'll see in some of the things that we're looking at for the new expansion of the shelter is really to help continue to provide education and responsible animal care, pet ownership, and living with wildlife. We believe that that's a critical thing that the shelter should provide to the community, and a partnership with the community to provide that education. Of course, to prevent cruelty to animals, find forever homes again for all of the adoptable strays and impounded animals, and to protect the health and safety of Sugar Land citizens and animals in connection with animal issues. Got it right that time. The city staff recently toured the new SPCA building that was constructed in that facility. And really, if any of you, I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's really a pretty nice facility. But from the original construction that we were looking at, by touring that facility, it provided a good introduction to some different ways that we could possibly construct the facility. So after reviewing that, when you see a couple of the floor plans in a minute, you'll see kind of some of the changes and some things that it allowed us to do differently. So as a board, we are reviewing multiple construction options. We have met with city staff. We have gotten several presentations from the consultants that we're working with, and we're looking at the best available space for the animals, cost savings versus the capital fundraising in mind, and really looking at all of the different options to where we can strike a balance between what we really need for the animals versus being good stewards of our citizens' money. This is just a real high-level initial drawing for you. As we look through these, we are still reviewing the plans. None of this is final. They're just really real high-level drafts for us at this point. But you can see the difference between that program there and this one here. And what you see in the difference here is after seeing those different construction things and viewing the things at the SPCA, it really has allowed us to look at this differently, laying out the space a little bit differently, and that type of building is going to offer some other options. And as I said, this is a very initial layout. The board has recently just been presented with this. We're going through it now, making recommendations, looking at it, as is the staff, to begin taking this kind of as an initial assessment and start, kind of tweaking and seeing, how we can make this work, be a better fit. But just wanted to present to the board a couple of things that we're doing, just so you can see the process that we're going through, and that there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. We've having a lot of discussions with staff and the consultants, and we're really excited to get this project going. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara, and she's going to talk a little bit about the capital campaign.
Thank you, Susan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am going to talk about the work done by the combination of our Animal Advisory Board and a fundraising subcommittee that is comprised of 3 members of our Animal Advisory Board and a staff representative, Catherine. We began analyzing all potential funding methods for capital projects. This top-level analysis wasn't limited by what methods we thought might be preferred by the city or anybody else. It was just a large top-level analysis of what funding opportunities were available for capital projects. We looked first at I guess I should say together with Jennifer Brown, who coached us through this process, we looked at those that would be done, or one that would be done by the city. First, we looked at bond issuance. That would be largely a city-funded and run fundraising effort. We analyzed the different bond types. We benchmarked techniques to gain bond approval in tight financial and political seasons. Next, we went on to things that could be done by our board and foundation. We looked at grants. The amount of grants, we researched grants that were available to build animal shelters, and those grants are probably in the tens of thousands. There are grants available that collectively might total several $100,000, but would not cover the total cost of this project, which meant other fundraising types would be required. So we went on to look at those. We looked at some of the newer avenues of fundraising, like social media driven, all the social media driven fundraising that can be done today. And we estimated the potential that can be raised by such a fund. We looked at endowment. This was a new term for our board. When a nonprofit and sometimes a government or state agency has a capital campaign, they often raise an endowment fund for the maintenance of the building or programs that might be done by within that building. And as we work through our wants versus needs and cost reduction to be fiscally responsible to taxpayers, we realize that provided we gain adequate square footage in the original design, an endowment fund could pay for wants that were not included in the initial build. That fund could continue to accept donations after the deadline of this project to help pay for programs in the future. And it could also offset the gap between representing the cost of care for animal treatment. For, some citizens feel that we should only pay to cover certain kinds of injuries or care for animals, and sometimes vets recommend that with a little more expensive treatment, an animal would have a positive outcome. So funding from an endowment fund could help pay the difference between that kind of thing as well. We met with the Sugar Land Legacy Foundation representative, the city representative, to investigate a partnership that would, with the Legacy Foundation, that would allow donors to receive tax benefit for their donation. We also analyzed tax law changes. In the last 2 years, there have been some changes that impacts individual ability to itemize in your taxes, and so we analyzed how they might impact a fundraising campaign as well. Next we looked at a category we call traditional fundraising. So these are the things that we've all probably heard of when we've been exposed to fundraising in our lives, like a gala or a named short-term campaign, or when we create a list of potential donors and go out and make an ask for a specific amount of money from them. And finally, we benchmarked naming opportunities. We looked at non-shelter types of facilities like universities or libraries. We looked at other City of Sugar Land facilities that have used naming opportunities. And finally, we looked at other shelter capital projects that use naming opportunities. We analyzed the dollar value, the square footage, and other requirements associated with naming opportunities. And then as we analyzed all of our fundraising types, We identified specific city policies that needed review and potential update to work with this project, including the donation policy, the animal services donation policy, the city naming policy, and capital donation policy, especially for the endowment. There would be a need to make some changes to our capital donation policy. We analyze shelter spaces with potential naming opportunities, so once we are given, or once we decide upon a final design, we can match those spaces in the design with the naming opportunities. And of course, all progress will continue to be reviewed regularly at with the Council Animal Task Force as it has been to date. Any questions for me before I hand it over to Stacy?
Anyone?
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Stacy?
So throughout this project, we have really focused on the shelter and the project's transparency. We have a webpage created to promote the Animal Advisory Board's work. Barbara and Susan have actually both participated in videos, and these videos are posted on the website, really talking about their involvement in the board. And so, we would highly encourage the community to take a look at the webpage. We've got some key FAQs out there as well. And just to kind of summarize our next steps, we are trying to finalize the program and floor plan layout and some associated renderings so that they would be prepared and ready for that onset of the capital campaign. Through a design process, we would continue cost refinement so that we can really determine what that final cost for the building construction would be. And then our last step would be to really initiate that capital campaign. At this time, myself and Susan and Barbara would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. I'm going to ask those of you that are on the Animals Advisory, Himesh and Bridget, if you guys would like to make a comment.
First, we are so impressed with the Animal Advisory Board. We want to thank you for all your hard work, and it's just amazing what you are doing to help our residents with our animals. So thank you very much. Once again, Councilmember Gandhi and myself serve on that task force, and we are very excited with all the work that is going on with the design of the building. It's being very thoughtful and being very mindful of the costs, which of course are very important because we have to make sure it's within budget. So we're very excited to see the next designs come forward to us.
Himesh.
Yeah, I just want to echo Councilmember Young's comments, and also just to kind of expand on that, what I've noticed from the outside in is you all on the advisory board not only have participated with advising on some of the policy recommendations, the shelter, but I've noticed in the community you all act as ambassadors on behalf of the city. And there's been some false information in the community relative to some of the topics that Susan brought up. And I just want to really thank you all for making sure that information is factual and doing it in a respectful way and really educating the community on the needs and how we treat animals. So thank you all for not only your participation here, but even outside of the chambers of the City Council. So appreciate it.
Carol.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thank you all so much for caring about our shelter animals at the level you do. I just had a quick question about the TNR. I know that the board decided not to go with that. I've heard people have different pros and cons about TNR, and I was just curious a little bit more about the thought process about that.
Susan, would you like to provide a little bit of input on the board's opinion?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about some of the discussions that we had, the pros and cons. I mean, some of the biggest cons that we saw from that is, yes, you are taking animals in, you're taking them in once, you're vaccinating them once and putting them back out basically in the elements. A couple of cons, you're vaccinating them once. They're not coming back in future subsequent years, so you have still a lot of opportunity for them to have diseases and spread diseases. And then you're also putting them out in the elements where, we've had discussions, there's dogs, there's coyotes, there's getting hit by cars, there's just a lot of things that can happen to them. So you have the discussion between, what's really in the best interest of the animal, and that's some of the reality of what happens to them once you put them back out in the environment. So.
Steve?
Yeah, this is just a question. In the vision statement, we talk about every adoptable animal will have a forever home. What's the definition of an adoptable animal?
Do you want to? Okay.
You can back me up. I'll back an adoptable animal would be one, obviously there are animals that can come in that have, diseases and issues. And what it really comes down to, is that treatable? Can you, within a reasonable cost, rehabilitate that animal to where they can go out into an adoptable home? Basically, it's any healthy animal that, or sick animal that can be rehabilitated and can actually, go to a home. There's, like I said, as far as animals that are euthanized, it's a very, very small portion. The city has maintained over a 90% live release rate, which is really awesome. So every step is taken to even make those sick animals, rehabilitated to where they can go out to a home. So, in the scheme of things, it's a very small portion of animals that cannot be adoptable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Amy?
That was my question.
I'm not sure which one of you will answer this. First of all, again, what you all have done is a yeoman's job of really looking at something that people feel very passionate about, and it sounds like you really put a lot of thought, and you were a team. You worked together, which really is impressive, to have people who are willing to do that, commit their time, and work well to come up with something that's going to work for all of our community. I just was curious because we saw one set of plans for the animal shelter, then we saw a second set of plans, and it was so tiny, it was kind of hard to see, but it looked like you had dogs and then cats on either side, and I was trying to figure out what are you trying to do here with this design that was different than the one before it?
Okay, so
is it smaller? I mean, what's going on here?
the square footage is about the same. What you'll notice is a little bit difference of a layout. So this is very much the original construction layout that we had looked at originally. The second one is really after we had visited the Houston SPCA. That is actually focused more on a metal building structure. So these buildings are created in more of a bay format. To where you can utilize a little bit more of the interior space. It's a little bit more cost effective in some regards. So that's what kind of encouraged us to look at other options and layouts. So you'll see a little bit difference in the actual shape of the building and how it's configured. But that's basically why. And in both of them, you'll see we've tried to focus on putting cats together, dogs together. Like the isolated animals are in a separate part of the building. And then you'll notice kind of the back of house laundry, office space, food prep and things kind of together.
The reason why I said that about the cats and dogs being between them, to me it looks like you've got cats up against the wall over here. Again, the writing's really small, and I'm probably squinting terribly. And then you have cats on this side up against the wall in those bays. And then in the middle, you've got small dogs. And then I think it says you have goats.
No, we would not have any goats.
I'm telling you, the writing's so
well,
I'm trying to figure out.
Not in the middle of the building.
Okay.
That's a place for the council, Amy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm
It's the
sure
new
that-
council offices.
Right, because I'm like looking at it, the writing's so small, it looks
It
like
is.
it said foul.
I think it's meet and greet, maybe. Is it too hard?
Oh, yeah, maybe it's me.
Well, and like we said, these are very high level at this point. They are not anywhere close to what the actual floor plan will end up being. These are just kind of representations of the different types of construction elements that we're looking at. And we're still, like Susan mentioned, the board and the staff is looking at these layouts to try to determine the best fit for the city's new shelter.
We'll have changes. But no goats. Thank you, I was confused.
Thank you,
so much.
Stacy. Thank y'all. Boy.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead. No more goat questions, Steve.
It's okay. In the current location, the planned location, there's eventually going to be a municipal court building in that same location. And I know that when you talk about metal buildings, that's not going to kind of fit with that municipal court building and EOC and everything. And so my personal view is that if you guys can come up with enough to build the shelter, I think the city ought to take care of make it look like the rest of the buildings. So that's just my comment.
Well, and we actually talked about this in the Animal Task Force meeting as well.
Your exact question was brought up this afternoon.
When we
And the
say,
answer was?
when we say metal, it's a metal structure, the interior structure of the building. It's not the exterior.
Okay.
The exterior, the SPCA building, they used a lot of stone and, those types of materials. So it's not the exterior of the building that's a metal building.
Okay.
It's just the actual interior structure of it.
Bridget?
Part of our conversation was that we really wanted the building to look in parity with the other buildings surrounding it. So no need to worry, Mr. Porter.
Also, Mr. Porter, the other thing I had wanted clarification on is if our development code doesn't allow that type of building, I didn't want the city's building to be in contrast to that. So.
It's pretty busy. A lot of people see it.
Right.
We want it to be the Sugar Land Way.
We want it to be inviting. We want people to want to go there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Understand where it's going to be located. It's going to be closer to Highway 6 or further away from Highway 6, or where does this, and I understand that property, but for anybody looking at, these girls here probably have no clue as to where we're talking about. So
on this layout, you'll see this is the existing police department building. So Soldiers Field is supposed to come up and be extended to Highway 6. So this is Highway 6 right up here. And so the buildings, the space for the shelter would be right here to the west of Soldiers Field.
Okay, and is there a ditch to the left of that?
There is.
Ditch H.
That's where I was
Correct.
trying to make it clear. So to the north of it is Highway 6, to the left side of it, well, looking at it from this direction, to the west of it is Ditch H. To the right of it will be the courthouse and the police station. And then what's behind it?
Right now, it's just some grassy area. There would be some parking and things like that, just to the south.
A little further behind?
Soldiers
Who's
Field.
looking at it? Soldiers
Field.
Okay, is there a retirement home back there, or what's back?
There's some office spaces.
Okay.
So
it'll
that are
just fit
directly
in
right
with-
behind it.
Exactly. It's not homes. There's not homes that are going to be looking at what's not going to be a tin building.
Right.
There'll be stone or brick, or it's going to fit in. So all of this will be contiguous and it'll flow. Sounds great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to actually ask the council members if we could move up item number 7, the appointments. 7A, consideration of an action on appointment of 15 members, 2 alternate members, a chair and a vice chair to the HOA Maintenance Responsibilities Citizen Task Force. We have our own Eric Oscarson, Assistant Director of Public Works. Eric.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you recall, The City HOA Maintenance Responsibility Task Force was put together to look at things like the streetscape policy and the tree ordinance and how that relates with the HOAs and the cities and who has responsibilities. Council went forth and we recommended put together a task force made up of citizens, HOA members, and non-HOA members that would be responsible for participating in community dialogue and discussing who's responsible for what, and sit down and have public roundtable discussions about them. This group would also be responsible for identifying gaps in the services and our ordinances. They would look at those policies and ordinances and recommend changes, and then they'd be responsible for advocating for those changes within the community. Staff recommended that we create a task force, 15 members. 7 members would be HOA board members, 8 members would be non-HOA board members or just regular residents, and we asked them to step forward with an 18 to 24-month commitment. In February, Council passed Resolution 1904, which authorized us to create the task force. It outlined the roles and responsibilities and the appointment of a chair and vice chair. February 20th through March 13th, we put the applications online for residents to apply. We held 2 optional informational sessions. We had 20 attendees that asked a bunch of questions, which was really well. We had a total of 30 applicants. And then on March 28th, staff met with City Council, the Finance Audit Committee, and we reviewed the applications, and they provided us a ranking of the recommendation for who were to be on the committee. When we put all those recommendations together and we totaled the scores up, we came up with a task force of the following members. The members on the left are HOA board members. We have 7 with 1 alternate. On the right are the non-HOA board members or the residents. We have 8 with 1 alternate. Finance Audit selected David Bristow from Commonwealth as the chair and Heather Guillen from Glen Laurel as the vice chair. Just so you can get a simple breakdown of where it's at, this map is kind of a visual representation of the different areas. You'll see the colors like blue, red, yellow, and green. Anywhere that's shaded in those colors are HOAs that are represented. When you look at the number of residents that live in HOAs, this grouping of individuals selected to be in the task force, this represents 76% of all the residents, which we think is a pretty good representation. When it's overall through all the residents within the city, including non-HOAs, it represents 62% of all total residents. And with that, based on the recommendation from City Council's Finance Audit Committee, staff is recommending the appointment of 15 members and 2 alternates to the City HOA Maintenance Responsibilities Task Force and the appointment of a chair and a vice chair. And I will take any clarifying questions for staff.
Thank you, Eric. I'm going to ask members of the audit if someone would like to kind of give an overview of the process. Steve, you want to do that?
Yeah, but I would just say that the staff provided a good process for this. We worked through it. The thing I wanted to say was to thank the residents that signed up that weren't selected. As you see, we were trying to get representatives across the city and different, whether they were in an HOA or not in an HOA, and just get a good broad representation to get input on this pretty important question about balance of who is responsible for what, who's going to pay for what. So just a big thank you for all the people that attended the meeting. We had some that attended and then decided to unapply. But thank you for those that attended the information meetings. Thanks to staff for staying late and putting on those meetings. That's what I want to say.
Okay. Anyone else?
Motion to approve. I actually have a question.
Go ahead, Amy.
And it's just the thought process. And it inures to my benefit, so I shouldn't even be saying anything. But you have Mary Favre, who's awesome from FCCA, and John Kackelmeyer, who's awesome from FCCA. But then you have the executive director of FCCA on it as well. And I'm just curious as to the thought process as to having the executive director. That's Jack Molo. And I love him. He's wonderful. But he's the exec, and so it seems a little bit, and so That was that's why I went, that was the only question I had about it, because it seemed like it may give FCCA a little bit of an edge, even though he's there on behalf of Imperial. And it's sometimes hard to take off the hat.
Well,
Well, we went through the map of everybody that had applied, and we went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And yes, there are, Mary is on there along with Jack, and we talked about that. And we thought that still they would benefit from being on the committee.
And I talked to Jack, and he's going to represent Imperial.
And like I said, I live in FCCA.
And I talked to Mary and said, Mary, he works for you. You're going to have to be nice to him because we're representing Imperial. So I've talked to both of them, and I felt like they could handle it. They're professional, they're adults, mature, and should be able to handle it fine.
Okay. And I, being a responsible human being, felt like it at least needed to be asked. I figured y'all had good reasons, and I'm fine with it. And like I said, it all inures to my benefit because I live in FCCA, so I'm, that's good, but.
Carol.
Just one other point. Jack was on the board of the Greatwood HOA for many years, so he has the perspective of also bringing in the Greatwood perspective into that. So we considered him just because of his breadth of experience, not only for Imperial, but also for Greatwood, too.
Okay. I knew there was a good reason. I just felt like I should ask. So thank you.
Got a motion. Do I have a second?
Here, second.
I've got a motion by Young, second by Mitchell. Any other questions? Why don't I just read? David Bristow will be the chair. He's from Commonwealth. Heather Guillen will be the vice chair. She's from Glen Laurel. And then we have Bristow, Favre, Lockwood, Manuel. Lewis, thank you for coming tonight. Stephen Miller, Stuart Ryan, Stephen Traley, and Parvez Hussein is the alternate. Those are the HOA board members. Ravi Aurora from River Park, Gillian, Harris, Holloway, Kekelmeyer, Moho, Sargent, Strouth. Patrick Ma is the alternative, the alternate from Glen Laurel. Those are the members. I've got a motion second. If you vote at this time, please. And it passes a 7-0 vote. Thank you for Finance and Audit for the good work on that, and staff for getting that in front of us. All right, we're going to go back to item number 6, workshop 6B, review of and discussion of proposed changes to the boating ordinance, Chapter 3, Article 10, Section 3177, and Chapter 5 of the Code of Ordinances. Kimberly Terrell, Assistant Director of Parks and Rec. Kimberly.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Well, I have to tell you that one of the best parts of my job in Parks and Recreation is the ability to connect people and parks through high-quality recreational opportunities. And that's what we have here. We have the opportunity to encourage boating at Memorial Park and Cullinan Park to create a great recreational opportunity. And up until the creation of Memorial Park, we really didn't have any park lakes that we could boat in. Eldridge Park would have been our biggest lake at that point. But our existing ordinances prohibit the use of non-motorized boats in our parks, in our waterways. And this activity, boating, is supported by our Parks Master Plan that we recently passed last year. So we wanted to try it out. So we did some pilot programs throughout the summer at Sugar Land Memorial Park. We got a concessionaire out there to do boating classes every weekend, and the response was phenomenal. We had beginner classes, more experienced classes, safety classes. Very good response on that. So in order to have boating in parks, there are a couple of ordinance revisions that we would have to do. One of those adds language to allow the use of boats on city-owned or controlled waterways that are designated and authorized by that use through the Parks Director. And this ordinance would still prohibit all motorboats and fuel-powered model boats on those parks lakes. So in white shows the specific ordinance changes. The first one is Chapter 3, Article 10, Section 3-177. And you'll notice that city-controlled waterways is highlighted. With the addition of Cullinan Park is owned by the city of Houston, but the city of Sugar Land controls it. So we needed to add that language there. And then at the end, we're just changing it to, unless such activities are authorized and permitted under this code or other city regulations. The other one is an addition to Chapter 5, Section 5-8, and that is the Parks section of the Code of Ordinances. This section says the use of recreational non-motorized boats, including but not limited to canoes, kayaks, and paddle boats, are allowed in city-owned or controlled waterways that are designated and authorized by such use by the director. And that is part of the Parks section. So in that section, director is defined as the Parks director. We reviewed this with the Parks Board. We reviewed it at their February meeting, and we also received a recommendation from them on their April 9th meeting just recently. It was unanimous. They didn't have any significant comments or questions. And so our next steps past this workshop would be a first and second reading of the ordinance, and if everything goes well and you all support it, then we will be able to continue our programs in the parks. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Amy?
I know the answer, but we have the Dragon Boat races right over there by Floor. Who owns that?
I believe that's owned by FCCA. There are a lot of waterways that are within the city, but very few are, well, controlled by the Parks Department, and also very few are controlled by the city as well. But I believe FCCA owns that.
So if it's not owned by the city, they can do boats if they want. We don't exercise any control over that. This is just city-controlled or city-owned.
That's my understanding, yes.
It's a great ordinance, and I move to, we're not doing the
No,
ordinance
just
yet.
workshop.
I'm all for it, though. It's a great
Steve.
idea.
When does this become effective? I mean, when would it become effective? At the passing of the second reading?
Right, yes.
Is there a boat launch in Cullinan Park?
There is not a boat launch in Cullinan Park. There is a place where you can access the water, but it's not specifically a constructed boat launch, but there is a place to access the water.
And so are we going to allow boating in Cullinan Park without a boat launch?
Yes, and it's the same with Sugar Land Memorial Park. We don't have a specific boat launch there. It's just the area, there's a nice sloped area where you can launch your boat from. It's not a specifically built-out boat launch.
How are we doing on liability in this? I guess we're immune as a city.
We're doing great. The legal department drafted the ordinance, and we looked into those concerns while drafting. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it's just Memorial and Cullinan, it's not Eldridge, right?
That's correct, sir.
So what's the thought on small motorized hobbyists not being able to use?
We really haven't had that come up. That's in the existing ordinance. We haven't had any issue with it so far, but we didn't really have a need to change that.
Okay, so there's really been no demand for it?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Bring it back to us as a revision of the ordinance.
Excellent, thank you.
Now we're going to move on to item number 6C, review of and discussion on the 86th session of the Texas Legislature. I just can't wait. Rick Ramirez, Intergovernmental Relations Manager.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight I'll be providing a legislative update on the 86th session of the legislature. The session started on January 8th. It's a 140-day session. We are in day 99. There are 41 days left in the legislative session. Before we get started, I want to kind of retouch on why we have a legislative program here in Sugar Land. First of all, cities provide local public services that our residents rely on. They range from public safety and drainage, but they go far beyond that, as you can tell just from all the presentations that we've heard tonight. The Texas Legislature can greatly impact what we do here at the city and the way that we provide those services. So what we've done is we've created and adopted a legislative program that's adopted by City Council on behalf of its citizens And we do this with input from 4 different groups. We have our Legislative Liaison Committee, which is a group of 40 individuals here at the City of Sugar Land. They're experts, they're planners, they're engineers. They work in parks and recreation, animal, and they give us their take on what these bills in the legislature would do to the city and how we provide our services. We also have a legislative consultant in Austin, and they help us navigate the legislature in Austin for us. We also have a committee of 3 from City Council. That's the IG committee, made up of the mayor, Hamesh, and Councilmember Young. And then we also have City Council themselves who review the legislative agenda and adopt it. So we have 2 goals, really, with the legislative program. We want to enhance and protect the quality of services and programs that we provide for our citizens. We also want to be able to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Our role in Austin is to represent Sugar Land residents. We do this by filing and trying to pass proactive legislation on behalf of the city. We communicate with our legislators, our business community, and other organizations here in the region. We actively support or oppose legislation. We do that by doing written and verbal testimony, letters, and registering positions. And then we also just monitor the legislative process, and we react accordingly to that process. So going into probably the biggest topic in the legislature is revenue caps. HB2 and SB2 have been the key issues at the legislature this session. And before we really go into those bills, I just want to say that from our reading of the bills, they essentially would affect our way to be able to do business because they do limit the amount of money that a city can collect. But they generally do not provide any noticeable tax relief whatsoever to our residents. But we are as a city, very cognizant of how we utilize and spend public funds. And we think that the best way to be able to provide meaningful tax relief is by attacking the largest portion of the bill, which is that of schools. SB2 was voted out yesterday. That bill is the Senate's version of the revenue cap bill. And it looks like it's going to be the new vehicle for how this legislation moves forward. If you would have asked me yesterday morning which bill would have been the vehicle, I would have said HB2, but what do I know? SB2 was amended from a 2.5% rollback rate to now it's a 3.5% rollback rate for cities and counties. Schools are still at 2.5%. There is an automatic election to exceed that cap. And because of the trying to get to a November November election date, there are changes to the calendar, and so it makes it to be an unworkable process for us. And it also makes it less transparent because there are some special meetings that we would have to have in order to hit those deadlines, and that would be difficult for us to be able to get those on an actual council night. We'd have to have them on a special council nights, maybe on Mondays or Fridays. It would be difficult to get people to see that those are there. And also, SB2 has a provision that the city cannot decrease first responder pay. HB2 has not been heard on the House floor. The House is now waiting for SB2 to get over to the House, and it's going to go through that process. So that'll be the bill to look at as we go through the session. The House adjourned, and they're not going to come back until next Wednesday to start considering these bills. There is a 2.5% rollback rate for cities and counties. Schools are not included in this bill. There's an automatic election, just like SB2. It also has horrible calendar provisions in there. There is a change, though, in HB2 to the definition of debt to include only voter-authorized issuances. And that effectively prevents new capital improvement projects until the city can move forward with the bond election. So that would mean there would be no new drainage, roadway, mobility, or facility projects until voters approve of those types of projects. Moving on to probably the second biggest topic of the session, at least for cities and at least for City of Sugar Land, is right-of-way rental fees. HB 3535 and SB 1152 both are moving along in the legislature right now. 1152 in the Senate has already moved past its House of Origin, and it's moved out of committee in the House, and it's about 80% of the way to passage. But what the bill does is it would allow a telecom or a cable provider, or telecom/cable provider, this is a provider who provides both of those types of services, to drop one of their rental fees and then not pay that to cities. So essentially, if they provide telecom, they provide cable, they would look at which ones is the lowest of those two statewide and then drop that from having to be paid. That potential impact can be at a minimum $267,000, and on the high end, it could be over $1 million. It's a rental fee. This is based on gross revenue. Unlike what it's been described in the Senate and in the House, this is not a tax. This is a rental fee. This is their right to be able to be within our right-of-way. And so this is a fee that is based on gross revenues. It's a taxpayer subsidization of the telecom cable industry, and it's an unconstitutional gift to a corporation. So you would expect, if this did pass, you would expect there would be litigation almost immediately after. Red light cameras. So there have been a number of bills filed that would eliminate the use or the ability for a city to be able to utilize red light cameras in their city limits. This legislation has essentially stalled, and we could almost effectively say that these bills are dead. Law enforcement officers, including our own Assistant Chief Schultz, attended hearings in the legislature to talk about our programs and to describe how useful and how they have been working for us. The chairman, Chairman Canales, has said about this bill in a recent Dallas Morning News article, passing the bill out without further tailoring would be tantamount to me voting something out and later having blood on my own hands. It would be very unlikely for him to reverse that. And so these bills are pretty much not moving anymore. Now moving over to our legislative proactive item. This is a bill that we have worked with Representative Rick Miller. It's HB 2203, and it has to do with the notice of radioactive releases. As you remember, there was an accidental release that happened here in the Sugar Land Business Park. This is a bill that would require state agencies and departments to be able to notify local jurisdictions about reportable radioactive releases. The notice will include the name, the quantity, and the state of matter of the radioactive substance released. It really is just a no-brainer type of bill, and there has been no opposition to the bill, and it's moving along quite fine. It's 50% of the way. So before we get into the next bill, I'm going to actually kind of educate you a little bit on what a county assistance district is. A county assistance district would allow a county to adopt a sales tax within one of their districts. The commissioner court would serve as the board, and they can't be wherever the combined total local total sales tax is already at 2%. It would have to not be maxed out. Funds can be used for a number of things, but mostly it's just improvements within those districts. So that leads us to HB 681 by Representative Phil Stevenson. So current law says that a municipality can exclude territory from a proposed CAD. The proposed law, HB 681, would remove the city's ability to be able to exclude territory from a proposed CAD, and it limits the ability to perform future strategic partnership agreements and limited purpose annexations. HB 681 is about 30% of the way to passage right now. And the county has been working with the representative to be able to push this bill to passage. They have also contacted us. They understood that we had some concerns about the bill and has offered to enter into an interlocal agreement to give Sugar Land approval rights to in exchange for not opposing their bill. Next, we're going to move into cemeteries in Fort Bend County. As you all recall, we just recently passed a resolution in support of House Bill 4179. The bill is about 30% of the way. It is bracketed for Fort Bend County, and it does have the committee substitute that would change the effective date to immediately if it got 2/3 majority in both houses. So if it did get 2/3 majority in both houses, it would go into effect immediately. It does not have to wait for the governor to sign it. The city, the county, and the ISD have passed resolutions in support. Moving on to special districts, House Bill 3019 by Miller was filed on behalf of a developer to create MUD 234 located in Tract 2 near the Central Prison Unit. The bill was filed without consultation with the city. The bill has been referred to House Land and Resource Management. It's about 20% of the way through. The city did contact Representative Miller's office and told him that we were not aware that this MUD was going to be created within our district. And Representative Miller is holding the bill until given direction from the city to move forward so we can review and give them comment. I'm not going to touch every single bill, and please keep in mind that there are going to be about 6,000 to 7,000 bills filed in the legislature. There's going to be around 200 to 300 bills that affect cities. Tonight, I'm not going to even go over every single thing that I put on these slides, but I will tell you that there are a number of bills that affect the way that we do our business. There are a number of preemption bills that would basically preempt our authority to be able to regulate businesses and other things within our city limits. We have economic development bills that are good bills. There's a bill that would extend Chapter 312. It was going to be sunsetting in 2019, and those bills would extend that program. There's an omnibus hotel bill that is probably worth noting because that one would lift a sunset date that the bill that we passed last session would have had to comply with. And so that is a great bill that would be able to help us out. And then there's other bills on online sales tax for municipalities to be able to collect that. Public health and safety bills out there having to do with our ability to expedite dangerous building proceedings. There's flood planning and mitigation and infrastructure. All those bills that you see there, those are pretty much the Harvey bills. Then there's a bill on lobbying that's starting to get some co-authors onto it, HB 281 by Middleton. That bill would essentially say that a city cannot use public funds to be able to influence legislation within the legislature. I will say one thing about this bill. This particular bill would basically make cities the only entity, the only interest in all of Austin that would not be able to tell their side of the story. And so when we took a look at the bill having to do with small cells and all those different kind of bills that have to do with large corporate interests, cities would not be able to tell their legislators how those bills affect us, or we wouldn't be able to do it effectively.
Rick, I'm going to stop you for a minute on that.
Yes, sir.
And when you look at, if you look at the campaign contribution accounts of the governor, lieutenant governor, and some of the other legislators up there, you can bet your bottom dollar that the lobbyists that are working for the charter and the cable companies have made substantial contributions to the legislators to make sure that they get that right-of-way bill passed and to make sure that they stop cities from employing our lobbyists at small, very small fees compared to what these private guys are working for these corporations. And I'm a private sector guy, but I'm telling you, what's going on right now with the cable companies and with AT&T is fundamentally wrong. And the public needs to wake up and get out there and contact their legislators and tell them to stop it right now.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to move on now to some other bills. There are other bills having to do with debt that would make you put all kinds of things on your ballot. There's other ones that would make a panel of judges decide what's going to be on your ballot initiative instead of having it done before, through city council. And then there's just a ton of bills having to do with moving the election of bonds to the November election. There is one bill from Phelan, Senate Bill 849, that has to do with detailed email notice to everybody within the city of whenever there's a change to any kinds of different fees within the city. So all of that's to say is we've got a lot of things that we're trying to juggle right now. We are working very hard there at the legislature to make our voice heard. A couple of dates of interest. May 27th is going to be the last day of the legislative session. That's the 140th day that's sine die. June 16th would be the last day that the governor can sign or veto bills. That's 20 days after sine die. So with that, I'll be able to take any clarifying questions for staff.
Meredith, I think I've got a legal question. Can you walk me through that?
Since I suspect this is not something we want to talk publicly, I would recommend an executive session under 551071 to receive legal advice.
This time we're going to adjourn into a special session. Recess into a special session, excuse me. Thank you, Rick.
Oh, here comes Steve. Oh, okay. Oh, everybody's coming now.
We can't have a takeover.
We have to close this meeting out. Going on to reports.
All right, item number 8, City Council, City Manager reports. I'm going to move that we defer, skip it. Okay. Item number 9, close executive session. 9A, close executive session is authorized Chapter 551 Texas Government Code in accordance with Section 551087 Economic Development Negotiations, and we'll adjourn into the council dining room.